Morning everyone, and welcome to this webinar series. I would like to, for today, I will be your moderator. Just give me 1 second. Let me just open some files. 1 second, yeah. Okay, thank you very much for taking the time to attend this webinar. Let's just start with a little bit of an introduction. So the Malaysian agriculture exhibits a slow growth in terms of its contribution to GDP. I mean, we know it's averaging about 7% to the GDP about every year. And we know that mostly it's from the industrial crops. In fact, over time, there has been this shift from rubber, cocoa to oil palm. As of in the 2000s, about 89% of the agricultural land, it's by industrial crops, primarily 2/3 by oil palm. Now, price-wise, I know that lately our prices have been pretty good. It's at as of today, it is at 3,676 per metric ton, and but we all know what goes up will come down, and the question is how hard will it come down, and will our industry be able to handle it? The other matter is that we also have the incidence of COVID, MCO, and always, and I know some of the industry players are aware of this, there's always this fear that the government of Bangladesh or Indonesia might decide to ban the export or the movement of their people into Malaysia, which means labor shortage. So labor shortage and price fluctuations has always been a fear factor in the industry, and we want to know how vulnerable it can be. So recognizing that, Khazanah Research Institute funded a project led by Prof. Fatima, as well as Dr. Elise, myself, and a group of other colleagues to model the oil palm industry in Malaysia. So without further ado, allow me to introduce two of our speakers today. Prof. Fatima, the project lead of this research. Prof. Fatima is a senior fellow at IDEAS. She is also the head of Agriculture and Food Security Cluster for Academy of Professors Malaysia. She is a research fellow at Institute of Agricultural and Food Policy Studies. And on top of that, she is currently a member of the National Agriculture Advisory Council to the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Industries. Our second speaker for today, Dr. Elise Renni, is a senior research officer at UPM. She did her PhD at the University of Portsmouth, United Kingdom, specializing in fisheries economics using system dynamics modeling approach. She has been active in research and advisory services for agencies such as World Bank, Khazanah Research Institute, Malaysia Productivity Corporation, WWF, government agencies, and others. Her research interests include agriculture economics, environmental issues, and valuation of resources. So with this, I pass on the presentation to our lead, project lead, Prof. Fatima. Silakan, Prof. Fatima.
Thank you, Dr. Sarina, for a very good introduction about the three of us here. And good morning to Zarul, the Secretariat for Academy of Professors Malaysia. And most of all, to all of you for putting aside your time to listen to three of us, three ladies here. All right, as mentioned by Dr. Sarina, this is part of our results from a bigger project. And that project is this. Sorry. Sorry, forgot to mention about the lines of discussion on this PowerPoint is about the project, a little bit of background of the project. And I would describe the problem statement of this presentation. A little bit of system dynamics, and for those who are familiar with system dynamics, I would focus on one of the major archetype in system dynamics, when we call it aging chain model, and then we show our simulations, and later we will look into what do they mean in terms of policy implication. The project, ladies and gentlemen, is this one. The title is System Dynamics Model of Industrial Crop. The bigger topic is implications of dominant shift to industrial crops in Malaysian agriculture. Dominant shift here is towards oil palm, and it has many implications as well as ramification. As you can see, the whole Jingbang are there, and I'm the leader, myself, Kusari, Dr. Ba, Dr. Elise, Dr. Abdullah, Dr. Sarina, and Gregory, Siti, and Ashraf. Thank you to all my team members for making it happen. So you guys can download the book. Yes, you can click the link there. I think Dr. Elise will provide you the link, and you can download the book and digest it. It can be overwhelming, but don't worry. It is not to say new approach, but an approach, computational approach to address some of the major issues of oil palm. All right, so that's the background. And the overall objective of that project is to identify key policy intervention, in order to revitalize the sector, particularly on the primary, focus here on primary and not secondary, primary production towards growth, equity, and sustainability. So we use the aging chain model in system dynamics. Don't worry about that. I will explain to you later. And we look at the potential improvement of system performance in terms of increasing the replanting fraction. We tried to derive at the so-called optimal fraction or rate, improvement in productivity, and of course improvement in input costs reduction, and of course the combination of these three strategies. But today, guys, I would like to focus on the major risks as mentioned by Dr. Sarina. Price downturn as has happened in last December. Of course, prices are good now. And of course, labor shortage as proven in the pandemic era. And we combine both the labor risk as well as price risk. Remember, we are providing you the computational model to examine the impact of this risk and to derive some good evidence-based conclusion to answer to that problem. Let's look at the anatomy of labor problem that we face in this country. Labor shortage, actually, it doesn't only became serious in pandemic time, but in umpteen years. I've come across an article, a book on plantation estate written by an Englishman, and he said the Englishman brought in laborers from India and China to help them with rubber estates, and that problem has persisted until today. Right, so it is a perennial problem to the country. And we look at the extent of shortage for oil palm. This is what I gathered from newspapers and some writing. 36,000, which is in shortage, and high percentage of them are for harvesters. Harvesters are a menial job, so we need them to harvest, and harvesting is not an easy job. And then they forecasted that the shortage now is about 62,000. So it is a serious issue. And then how dependent are we on the labor force? About 3/4 of labor force are foreigners. And in 2010 is about 215K, and 2019 is about 300K. This is estimation by MPIC from the annual report. By region, you can see Peninsula about quarter, with local, 3/4 are foreigners for the whole of Malaysia. Peninsula is about more than 1/3, Sabah 90%, and Sarawak 72%. This is based on Muhammad Saleh article. The origin, can you see the dynamic in 2000? Almost 100%, 93% were Indonesian, but now it has reduced to 3/4. And I'm sure all of you know that Indonesia has overtaken us, have gone to Kalimantan to open up, and those laborers have gone home to work in the oil palm plantation, and then only now we only employ about 3/4, and we are about 11%, depending on the Indian workers and Bangladeshis. So there are many there in our estates, right? The impact, the probable impact, no, not probable, already happened. This is what I gathered from MPOB. The shrinkage in production in CPO is about 4% from 1.9 million ton. It has reduced to 1.91 million ton, and the estimated loss is about 2 billion. But we have not measured or analyzed carefully the unestimated impact there is cascading impact on the downstream revenue, export earning, and so on. At the moment, for FFB, we have lost about 2 billion. So it's a big loss there caused by foreign labor. This is a graph by data provided by immigration as well. This is what I was informed. The immigration as well as NPIC as well as NPOB. So the red line is total plantation workers. They only have data from 2010 onwards. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the earlier data. And required workers are the those pink area between the line here and required. So a lot there. And the immigrants are all the blue lines, right? And the blue lines are Indonesian and the rest are non-Indonesian. So as I mentioned earlier, since our colonial days until now, it has become a perennial requirement to depend on the foreign workers, right? As long as we have estates, we need foreign workers, right? So that's the background problem. And I'm sure all of you are familiar. This is data from 1980 with regards to oil palm compared to our rival, which is soybean. Of course, all the time they are in premium to crude palm oil. And as you can see, I've shown in my first introduction, you can see the variation, the change in prices, they are quite volatile. But the volatility, I've done a study earlier, the volatility is much more in the case of cocoa and rubber as well. So oil palm, if you utilize coefficient of variation, as you can see, if you utilize a coefficient of variation, you can see, oil palm, sorry, I took back my statement. Oil palm is the highest, right? So the red one is the coefficient of variation of oil palm between decades, 2010, decades of 11, 12, and as you can see, 2020, the coefficient of variation of oil palm is the highest, 0.21. That means prices vary about 21% within the range of variation, 20% plus and minus around the mean. So oil palm is volatile indeed, right? So that is the background of the problem. That is that industry is forever or perennially face price risk. It could be downturn. Upturn is very good for the industry, but not good for the consumers. But downturn can be damaging to the industry, and of course, labor shortage. And of course, the reduction is a bit small, but some.
Prof. Fatima, we can't hear you.
Prof, we can't hear you.
Prof?
Can't hear you. We can't hear you, Prof. I think maybe your mic got disconnected.
No. Prof, you might want to unplug the headphone cable first and plug in again.
Hello?
Yeah, now you're good. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. So until and when MCO is uplifted, maybe we can go back to so-called normal with new norms, all right? So I want to show you, introduce to you an archetype which is very popular or very dominant, not just dominant, but it has been used in system dynamic analysis. It is called aging chain model, meaning a system that shows the relationship between various cohort in a system. It could be a population, it could be trees, it could be animals, or it could be plants, it could be workers in the office, and so on. So in this case, for oil palm, so we have classified 3 major cohorts. They are immature, right? Mature and over mature. And as you can see from the diagram, they are interconnected in the sense that immature comes from new planting, correct? New area, and also maybe conversion from rubber and cocoa, and then they're mature, and it goes out from that area, right? They become mature, and then they become aging, and then aging, either they, like me, will go off from the system, or some will be, the land will be converted to become immature, young trees, right? So the whole system will just go on in a loop, all right? So this is what we call aging chain model. We use this model as a basis to analyze the impact of price risk along the movement of cohort in terms of area, immature, mature, and over mature, and trees, mature trees, and over mature trees, right? And from there, we can see the combination of immature trees, mature trees, and over mature trees, and the total production. So we inject into the system the shock of price downturn, the shock of labor shortage, and we see the impact of immature production, and also in terms of area. So that's how we do our work here. Right. This is causal loop diagram. I know for those who are not familiar with it, don't worry. Just focus on one stock. This is what we call stock. What's going in is will determine the number of stock as well as what's going out, right? So what's going in, don't forget there are also stock that are going out. Say, for example, there are new conversion, right? That reduces the stock, right? But that stock will receive an additional inflow in terms of late replanting or new planting. And once they mature, it reduces the area. So the dynamics of going in or inflow and outflow make the stocks very dynamic over time. Okay, so that's what it is all about. And the same thing is replicated in mature area, replicated in idle land. Yeah, there are inflows and outflow all the time. But of course, there are stock that are not, there is no inflow. For example, petroleum, for example, it takes billion years to come up with a petrol, petrol is made of carbon, or the same thing with diamond. It takes a million years to come up with diamond. So the stock may be more of extraction out rather than replenishment from nature. So in this case, we look at a system where there is inflow and there is outflow, right? So that's what causal loop diagram is all about. So we translate that causal loop diagram into what we call stock and flow. The problem, not to say problem, the major traits of oil palm is that it receives new areas every year, right? Because oil palm is very attractive. That's what we have discovered. When we look at the markup or profit margin ratio of oil palm compared to rubber, compared to cocoa, they are very attractive. So we have seen, I mean, some of you are familiar with the downfall of cocoa, yeah? Now only about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 10,000 from 200,000 in 1991. All has, I think we can hypothesize that all has been converted to oil palm. So into oil palm immature, right? That is new area in oil palm. And rubber also now from 2 million in 1970s now only left about 900K hectare of oil palm, and with 90% of smallholders. And big chunk of that, besides urbanization and so on, big chunk of that goes into immature area of oil palm. And as I shown earlier, the immature will flow into, will become mature, will become over mature, and some will be going back to immature, right? Can you see the loop there? It goes back into the system. So we model our aging chain using this archetype. It is called archetype. Archetype means a general behavior that we can observe in normal life events. Yeah, right. So for those who are familiar with, I know some of you have done system dynamics. This is how we translate from causal loop diagram. Causal loop diagram is basically a mental model. We translate that into relationship between variables, and translate that into a stock and flow, and then we embed all these the variables, the major ones that we think affect the behavior of relationship between rubber, cocoa, and oil palm. This behavior include markup ratio between oil palm and rubber and cocoa, replanting rate between all these three subsectors, and how they go into the system, going out into the system, how they went into oil palm, and in oil palm in the middle, see how the dynamics within an oil palm system create the behavior of oil palm industry. All right. Okay. So that's basically what we did for aging change of oil palm sector. We have estates as well as smallholders. So we have one model for estate and one model for smallholders. Right. So the whole analysis hinges on this very important table, which is on yield by age for oil palm. Very sad to say this data refers to 1980 and Ismail Azman, I think Azman Ismail and Muhammad Saleh has written this paper way back in 2002. The optimal age of oil palm replanting, right? So these are the low replanting and so on. So when we have our area, we want to see what is the production. We rely on this table to estimate the production. So this is a very, very important parameter that we use to estimate production. Right. So in order to inject the price downturn event, we have to add this additional structure, right? So we inject this structure into the system, say, and we see the impact of price on. Sorry, can you hear me? The impact of price on replanting rate, right? So replanting rate will go into the system, right? It affects the immature area. Immature area will mature, becomes mature area, and becomes over mature, and this will affect the production. Okay, so this is how we analyze the impact of price downturn simulation on the oil palm system. But remember, oil palm system is also determined by inflow from rubber and cocoa. Right, and this is for labor shortage. Okay, a labor shortage, we also add another additional structure where we look at relationship on the effect of labor availability on yield, one, and the effect of labor availability on replanting rate. So these are two variables that determine production, yield and availability of replanting, right? So we add this additional structure into the base system, the base model, and we get the results of this simulation, right? Never mind if you can't grasp it, but you can download the book and study it, and you can come back to Dr. Elise or me or Dr. Sarina to get further details, right? Okay, so now what if we combine both two major shocks, downturn and labor shortage? We combine that, and also we kind of relate that to the base model, and we run the simulation. Okay, right. So what are the impact of policy simulation? There you are, guys. So these are the various combinations we do. Labor shortage, the 30%, there are 6 mixes there, right? 30% and 50%. Number one, we do S5, which is 30%, 50%, 80%, and the same thing with price downturn, and we combine both. The impact variable are the area, mature, immature, and over mature, production, mature and over mature, and of course, sometimes we input in revenue. Okay. So say we look at the impact of labor reduction on estates, right? Remember, system dynamics is not interested in point-to-point prediction. Econometric is good at point-to-point, but for system dynamics, we look at behavior over the long run. And the behavior, as I mentioned earlier, is determined by structure. So as you can see here, right? 30%, 50%, 80% in terms of the various combination of mature, immature, and over mature. But this is the same thing with smallholder. They do differ in a way, right? And okay, so maybe this is simpler to look at the impact of labor shortage to estates and smallholder. As you can see, the difference is that the smallholder, the blue line, is the mature area. We have observed that smallholders have more over mature compared to estates. This is because smallholders look at their trees as an asset, whereas estate look at their trees as capital. The moment that it doesn't give higher return, they will just cut it off and move to somewhere else, either housing estates and so on. Just like in the case of rubber and cocoa, the moment rubber is no longer profitable, they move to oil palm. The moment cocoa is no longer profitable, they just pluck up the cocoa trees and move to oil palm, but not smallholders. Smallholders looking at rubber trees as well as oil palm trees as their assets for their livelihood, for their family, and so on. So they don't easily jump to conversion, but they maintain the trees and you know, see higher in terms of trees, and we can see the impact on, yes, right, just now was the labor, and now is the price. Yeah, as you can see, for example, if 80% of price downturn, estates will reduce about 39%, whereas compact to smallholders is about 29%. So the impact on smallholder is much lesser compared to the estates. All right, because the way they look at their trees, and that affect their replanting rate, that affect the over mature areas compared to mature and immature. Therefore, that affects their production. Right. So we have observed that the yield of old trees for the smallholders are much higher than the estates, because they need the trees, right? Even though it is over mature, they don't easily cut them off for replanting. They wait for 3-4 years and see how things goes. At the same time, they will you know, make sure the trees will give good returns. These are based on our focus group discussion with smallholders. This is what they say towards rubber trees as well as oil palm, right? So our finding shows that oil palm system may collapse when labor shortage reaches 80% for both estates and smallholders. If labor shortage reaches by 80%, the whole system will collapse. And the impact on estate production is much more severe compared to smallholders. In fact, system may collapse under mixed tree. This one, yeah, it will collapse for estates. And we believe that based on our results, smallholders handle price downturn a bit better than estates, because they can diversify, they can improve their practices, they borrow their families, friends, labor, you know, they share their resources, human resource with their friends to maintain the old trees, to maintain yield and so on. So those are our major findings. Conclusions, I didn't put here, but the major contribution of this study is we are able to produce, to replicate a computable model based on system thinking to examine the impact of price downturn and labor shortage on the industry, oil palm industry, be it in mix of area, immature, mature, and over mature, be it in terms of production, right? From mature area, over mature area, we can even calculate revenue. There are in millions. We didn't show that here. So we provide a computational model based on system thinking. The difference here is system. Yeah, systems as defined by Barry Richmond, the founder of System Dynamics, is the ability to oversee or to view the forest and the trees at the same time. That's what systems thinking is all about. So we have a system, and within the system, we have all the elements that made up the system. So that is the major contribution of this study, a model to analyze the impact of these shocks into a system, right? So based on this study, we can say that both price downturn and labor shortage are serious threats to oil palm industry, as concluded by Dr. Serena earlier. Of course, nobody will say, oh, what's new? What's so new about that? But as I said earlier, we are able to compute it, to estimate it, and to give an evidence-based analysis of the impact of these shocks. That's our contribution. And between the two, labor shortage is much more damaging. Yeah, between the two, price trees, the smallholders can diversify into lamb, into vegetables, into rambutan, and even aquaculture, because they depend on their farms for their livelihood. So they will find ways to improve their lifestyle. But maybe it's different from estate. As for price risk, the estate involved in hedging activities. Some of the big estates, I'm very sure they involve in hedging activities. Yeah, we have oil palm futures in our bursa. and they can do intraday trading or whatever strategy with at CBOT or Chicago Board of Trade or any other exchanges in the world, as well as internalizing cheap CPO into their own mills. They have their own mills because they have an integrated system, so they can channel the cheap CPO into their own mills and they make profit from producing refined palm oil. And smallholder is relatively resilient under both shocks because all palm trees are assets that are important for their livelihood, for their family, for their children. Hence, tend to keep old trees with good care. So over mature trees for smallholders yield it takes a long time for the trees to reach a very low because they tend to maintain those trees. Also, they replace foreign labor with family laborers, neighbors, and so on. The difference is that estate is more capital oriented. Yeah, we saw in the case of cocoa when estates moved to oil palm during price downturn, while it took a longer time for smallholder to shift crop, right? Similarly, estate behavior is observed with rubber. More than 90% of producers are smallholders. So for those who are familiar with Amartya Sen and even IFRI has concluded that investment of smallholders will give you higher multiplier effect because it involves large number of farmers, it will reduce poverty, it will dynamicize the sector and better contribution, higher contribution from the smallholders. All right, so policy recommendation, price risk can be minimized. This is not new. Diversification of enterprises, farm and non-farms, both for estates and smallholders. Value-added activities, they're also for smallholders, and I would like to propose small mills. We need to develop small mills and collective effort, either cooperative or group farming or whatever, for smallholders to venture into value-added activities. And I think hedging activities can be expanded to smallholders if you provide them a good education and prepare them, right? Through cooperative, I'm sure Felda Cooperative, for example, they can go into hedging. They have gone into the Bursa. Of course, they were swindled by FGB, but they can, with their strong force and a strong training, they can do hedging at our Bursa and probably overseas. And that has to be looked into. And of course, digitalization of marketing activities and supply chain for transparency. I don't want to say a blockchain, but I think the feature for blockchain is very good for oil palm. And I saw some conceptual paper to introduce blockchain into oil palm. Right. Labor shortage risk can be minimized, digitalization. Of course, I am aware of that some practices was meant to be menial. And some people said that God meant it to be that way. Picking of grapes, for example, it has to be done manual, or menially. So maybe you can focus on other aspects like collecting of FMB. If you can come up with transport to collect golf balls, I'm very sure you can come up with transport to collect fresh fruit branches on the ground. I think so. So it's a matter of commitment to come up with those gadgets and transport to help the industry. Higher return to producers by allowing them to participate in value-added activities, particularly both to smallholders, particularly estates, because if you have higher return, it attracts new entrants, the youngs, right? The youngs, I'm talking about primary sector, the young to get into it, and as well as local workers, right? You have higher profit, therefore you can hire local workers. Right, so because, for example, you can increase productivity, you can increase OER. This thing has been dormant for not dormant, more or less static over time. If you improve that, higher your return, and that enable you to give higher wages to the local workers as well as new potential entrants from the youngs. Right. Of course, institutional support. So there's no need to mention, but it has to be enhanced. R&D to improve variety, intensify replanting, recycle of farm waste into input production. We need to come up with our own input to reduce cost of production, as well as value-added products, to come up with our own fertilizer based on palm-based product and so on. And I think with this, we hope to improve our competitiveness as well as profit margin to the industry. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof. What's going to happen next, ladies and gentlemen, is that Dr. Elise will show the model for about 15 minutes, and then we will have Q&A. Now, if you have any questions, you can type it out into the chat group, or you can ask live later when we have the Q&A session. So with this, I would like to invite Dr. Elise to present her modeling work. Thank you.
Right. Hello, everyone. Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Sarina. Thank you, Prof. So I'm going to show how does the model look like in one of the system dynamics tool. So here I use VanSim, and beside VanSim, there are other system dynamics tools that can be used. For example, we have Stella Architect, we have iThink, and then we have PowerSim, which is very powerful tool because PowerSim is more, what we call that, compact and more detailed, and whereas VanSim is very much simplify things. But of course, you have to understand the concept of system dynamics modeling first before you get yourself used to the tool. Here, I'm going just to show how VanSim works. And one that I'm going to, so just to confirm that everyone can see my slide, right? Okay, good. So how we validate our model is that one of the crucial thing is to replicate the reality or replicate the historical data of what we have. So for our research, we have historical data for total cocoa area, immature area for cocoa, and we have total oil palm area, immature oil palm area, and total rubber area, and over mature rubber area for estate. So the model that I'm showing here is for estate. So in order for us to validate is that we started with the aging chain model, just like what Prof. Fatima has mentioned earlier in her presentation. So we have this immature, mature, and over. Sorry, we have immature, mature, and over mature. So these are within the aging chain model. And from this aging chain model, we have expanded into this very big, what we call that, system of conversion from cocoa and rubber into oil palm area. So I'm going to show the result to replicate the behavior of the historical data. So we have the base run. The base run is the run that we simulated using the model that we have. And we have the historical data. Okay, so here, if you can see on the right side, we have the historical and also the base run of the model. So from here, when we simulated, we can see that for total area cocoa, so these are, okay, let me just close this. Okay, so you can see here, the historical is the blue line, and the total cocoa area for estate is the red line, and we managed to replicate it beautifully. So it fits very well. So this is one of the validation that we did so that we know that this is good to go for further policy analysis. So this is an example, total cocoa area. We also, let me just, okay, and for total oil palm area, you see, so for the historical data we have from 1987 up until 2017, and then 2017 up until 2050 is our policy simulation. Like Prof said, is a long run analysis. We don't say it's forecast. We don't say forecast in system dynamics, but it's more on what if situation, the behavior from 2017 up until 2015. And for rubber area, so you can see this is the blue is the historical and the red is the simulation from the model itself. So once you get this behavior from the model itself and replicate the historical data, then of course there is another one or two analysis that you have to do in order to validate or to show how robust is the model itself. And like I say, one of the things is this to replicate the behavior of the historical data, or in system dynamics, we call it as reference mode. So once you manage to get this reference mode, then the model is ready for policy analysis. And of course, it depends on what kind of policy analysis that, that we are going to do. So for this research project, we're going to focus on the labor shortage. We have price downturn and double shock, where we put labor shortage together with the price downturn together, and to see how this policy analysis impact or affected this total area, the immature area, and of course the FFB production of a state. So I'm going to show first our labor shortage policy analysis. So I'm going to take out. So this is one of the features that they have in VanSim. Okay, while I'm doing this, I'm also going to mention about this VanSim software. It's not like VanSim software. We have two kind of VanSim software, where one is the PLE version, another one is the DSS. For PLE is for student or for those who are started to, just started to learn how does the VanSim works in VanSim. Of course, you can use other tools, but for VanSim, there's PLE and DSS, where the difference is that DSS is more advanced, where you can do more analysis, more cosmetic, those kind of things. So that's differentiate the VanSim, DSS, and also PLE. So I'm going to show you the first simulation policy analysis, which is about the labor shortage by 30%, 50%, 80%. And also we compare with the base run. So base run is the current situation. So we have on the right side, the base run, the labor shortage, 30, 50, 80%. And we have loaded, and we can see on the immature area, how does this impact? So it's the same as what Prof has showed in the results slide. So this is how does the labor shortage affected the immature area. The blue line is the base, the current situation without doing anything. And then you have this labor shortage by 30%, which is the red line. The green, the 50%, and the gray color is the 80%. So you can see that how this labor shortage affected the immature area by hectareage. You can see the unit here on the left side. And we have on the mature area as well. It's the same, the blue line is the base, the red is the policy analysis, 30, 50, and 80. So you can see here that by one policy analysis, by changing the percentage of labor, in this case, we reduce by 30%, 50%, and 80%. And this will affect other variables as well. But for this model, we would like, we want to see how this affect the area, especially, and of course, the FFB production. You can see here. So the blue is the base where the current situation again, and then those three lines of the impact on the FFB production for a ton per year. Okay, so that is the first simulation. Then you also have this price downturn by 30, 15, and 80%. Sorry, okay. So again, how would price affect the area? So for total area, sorry, for immature. Okay. So this is how price will affect the area itself. You can see the blue is the base where without any policy changes, and the red, green, and gray with the policy changes by reduction reducing the price downturn 30%, 50%, and 80%. And we also have the double shock. which is the labor shortage and also price downturn. So for this double shock, for labor shortage, we have 30% and 50%, whereas for price downturn, we have 3 percentage reduction, which is 30%, 50, and 80. So again, it will affect the area of oil palm, immature, mature, over mature. I mean, okay, so you can have all this, what we call that, the result of the simulations in one graph, but for Vensim, there's a limitation for that. There's only 16 maximum. So for presentation purposes, usually we present it by policy, per policy simulation instead of putting everything. So it will be much clearer, like what I did earlier. So this is for immature area. How does the price downturn affected the immature area? Okay, so I think one more thing that I would like to show is that besides having the replicating the historical data, we also did some sensitivity analysis. One of the sensitivity analysis is just to see how sensitive is the model when you have some changes. For this model, I'm going to show you how the replanting rate, we did about, let me, here for different percentage. So I'm going to compare with the baseline. Okay, so for immature area. So you can see that how sensitive is the model once you have some changes to the replanting rate. So it will show all the behavior of those replanting rate in percentage. So here the baseline is the blue line, the bottom one, and the rest are all the replanting rate that we have run or simulated in different kind of fraction or percentage. So just to show that how sensitive is the model, and just to show the point that system dynamics is all about one variable affecting other variable. Of course, the variable is endogenous or exogenous. Endogenous is very sensitive, like it will be affected. Also, it can affect other variables. And if you are asking about how can we come up with this kind of model, again, it will be back to the objective of the research itself. And again, and also the data itself is not from only the time series or historical data, but it also from focus group discussion that we had with stakeholders, various stakeholders, smallholders, the industry players. You know, for example, that when it comes to the conversion from rubber to oil palm, for the for those estates stakeholders, they have a different way of you know, replanting, that they say that they replant it after 25 to 28 years of the tree, whereas for the smallholders, they don't convert them on the date of 20 when it comes to tree have matured to 28 years old, because of the financial situation. Estates, they have more money, they have more grant compared to the smallholders. So that's the difference. That what makes the estate and smallholders model different when it comes to this model. So I think just that from me. So back to you, Sarina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elise. Okay, we have a bit of time. I thought since we have a bit of time, before we go into Q&A, I know that the report is bigger. Basically, we've done other things besides labor shortage and price volatility. Prof and maybe Dr. Elise, you might want to share a little bit about replanting rate that we discovered.
Yes. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Prof. Yeah, yes,
Hello,
Prof.
Prof. Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, okay, thank you so much. Right. Yes, examining the hello, hello, hello.
Hello,
We can
Prof.
hear you, Prof. We can
We
hear
can
you.
hear you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, okay, sorry. Examining the replanting rate was a very challenging task for us. The purpose was to find the optimal replanting rate that will yield the maximum production. So this is what we have arrived at. That is the optimal level of replanting rate for estate is 15%, whereas for the smallholders is about 17%. Am I right, Elise? Hello?
Yes, yes, Prof. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Maybe Elise can show, have you shown the various sensitivity analysis that we do for replanting rate?
Yeah, I did just now. I showed. In
Yeah.
fact, I think there's a question from Amy Farha alias. How do you know replanting rate is sensitive in your model? What I can see in your presentation, the variable is not too sensitive. How do you determine your model boundary? Okay, so for replanting rate, that's just an example that, yeah, of course, you can have the lowest impact or the lowest fraction just to see how does the replanting rate affect the immature area and also the rest of the oil palm area. At the same time, you can have the maximum value of replanting rate just to see how does it affect, again, to the oil palm area. That's just one of the way just to see the sensitive analysis, sensitivity, how sensitive the model is. Of course, there are other ways as well to check the sensitivity by, you know, to have some worse shock. For example, like you can have 3 or 5 shocks to the model just to see the impact. That's how we run the sensitivity analysis. Again, like I said, in system dynamics, the one that I show is just a small part of it. There's more ways of how to run the sensitivity analysis. I mean, you can go through the report where we have detailed out what we have done in order for us to validate and also to show how robust is the model. Yeah, Prof, maybe you would like to add and in terms of the model boundary?
Yes. You can include everything, but not everything matters, right? So we have to look at the, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
Prof.
Prof.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can include everything, but not everything matters. So one has to be very careful to find out what are the major drivers that affect the behavior of the players, correct? So the players here, sorry, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, Prof, we can hear you.
Something wrong with that. The computer is like me, the old computer.
Now we can hear you, Prof.
All right, guys. Determining the boundary is quite it's an art itself, right? Art meaning you know, anything can be inserted in, but what to be inserted are what matters to the problem. So the problem here is about price downturn as well as labor, right? And we want to see the impact on production. Everything hinges on production. The success of the industry depends on yield as well as production. And the factors affecting yield are replanting rate as well as the variety, which we look into the first few simulation, and as well as the composition of the trees. And there are 3 cohorts here: immature, mature, and over mature. So if you look at the report, one of the major contribution of the report is that we were able, I don't think MPUB has done this, we were able to estimate the yield of over mature trees, not only estimating the yield, but also distribution of the yield and production by the age of the trees. So that's where we have found out that the smallholders yield for over mature trees are much higher than the estates. Because you know why estates are a bit different in terms of their perception or their farming policies. Old trees have to be uprooted and replanted with new one. In a way, it does good, but for smallholders, it's different. They need the trees to maintain their livelihood, so they are very conservative to convert it. This is very apparent in the case of rubber, and similarly with oil palm, it takes time for them to, you'd be surprised that they are rational people. It takes time for them to find the right time to convert. Until and when their situation is protected, their family is taken care of, then only they convert. So that behavior separates the smallholders compared to estates. So these are some of the consideration when we want to identify what are the variables that in the structure that determine the behavior of the industry. So in this case, the behavior is manifested in terms of the behavior of production over the years, right? So I'm sure Amy and the rest will know that for all palm, the behavior can be inferred in terms of certain important variables behavior over time. So production in terms of say 1960s to now, or area composition from 60s on now, that explain the manifestation of the impact of the structure on the industry performance indicated by their behavior. Thank you. Hello. Hello.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, we can hear you, Prof.
Okay, good. Yeah, sorry.
All right,
Okay.
maybe since then, why don't we move on to the Q&A?
Yes.
I go to there's a list of questions here already. Let's just start with just a moment, yeah? Let's go to the first question. I think it was by, quick one, hang on. I need to scroll up. From Encik Rashid Sharif, Prof. With current unemployment in the country, can some of the unemployment be trained to work in plantation? Can you share your experience in trying to implement this?
All right. Okay. I don't know why the government keeps on mentioning about the 3D, 3D situation of working in agriculture, but our youngs forget that when they drink coffee, 1 cup of coffee, 15 ringgit at Starbucks is also agriculture, all right? Or so when they eat in, all this fancy restaurant, that's part of agriculture, except that oil palm is at the primary level. So maybe it's quite difficult to draw the youngs into the sector, but provided we provide good level of wage rate and also the perks and so on, I think we can get them into the sector. But some adjustment has to be made in terms of the wage rate and the perks that they have to earn, as well as maybe some mechanization to be introduced. If it is too laborious and so much hardship, and even the Indonesians are running away, or maybe except for the Bangladeshis and the Indians, they are they are hard up for good income, so they are willing to stay. So it's not an easy answer, but I think to get some 10% or 20% of local is more than just enough, I think. Okay.
Sorry, hang on. Let me just 10 to 20%. Did you say, Prof?
Yeah, about 10 to 20%, right?
Locals, yeah. Okay, Prof. Another question by Mr. Abdul Jalil Zawawi. I need to know about your recommendation to use digitalization method to minimize the risk of labor shortage. We know that oil palm plantations are very dependent on labor. If we can't get the labor, how is it that digital method can help the industry to substitute this? So maybe based on your recommendation, Prof, how do you see digitalization coming in here?
What about you, Dr. Serena? Do you have your own answer there?
I don't. I'll leave it to you, Prof.
Yeah, how can you? Okay, right, guys. Maybe some of you here can give some ideas. All right, but as I have written in my answer, since colonial days, oil palm, rubber, and cocoa, or these commodities in other countries are very labor dependent. So that's why I said some agronomists concluded that it was meant to be. Some processes have to be done by hand, right? Some processes can be mechanized, but not, say, for example, one example that I'm very familiar, not familiar with, what I heard is grave picking, it has to be done by hand, and some of them they have to step on it to, they have to step on it to produce the wine and so it can be menial. But I think it's not about totally doing away with menial or laborers' energy, but it's about to minimize them, right? Minimize not about 5%, but I think if you reduce it to 70% or 75% and so on, it's good. The problem with Malaysia is we didn't attempt it at all. You know why? Because they are cheap, right? The corporate sectors that are advising the government, they think that the only way to improve the industry, to increase competition, is by reducing the labor costs. But if you look at advanced countries, the labor wage rates are very high. So that attracts entrants, that attracts the young. The moment you utilize lower wage rate laborers, it minimizes, it discourages innovation. What kind of
Prof, I think what Abdul Jalil is trying to ask is he's trying to understand when you suggest digitalization, how does that play a part in reducing labor risks?
Setting the scene, Sarina. I'm setting the scene that you cannot avoid. It's inevitable to do away with laborers. We need the man or the human muscle to help with the oil palm, but we can minimize the dependency by digitalization. All right. I'm not a IT person, but I think, for example, I saw say for example collection of golf balls, and I had the idea that you can do that in oil palm, but we didn't explore it. And harvesting, they have chantas machine, which is very expensive. Not only that, it is heavy, and then when the worker uses it, it's very shaky and it's tiring for them. So we need to, innovation is a long process. It's a very, can be costly process, but we must continue and seek ways to do harvesting. And I think MIMOS has come up with a method of identifying pollination time by using AIs, right? That's one way. And transportation, I can see people are still using trolleys to transfer fresh fruit branches, But I'm sure we can come up with a transport to increase the speed, efficiency, and so on, right? So it's seeking it. Number one. And number two, I was in the PAC for almost, I think, 10 years. And I saw the R&D are focusing on downstream, what to produce, or vitamin A, oleochemical, and so on. But they put little emphasis on the downstream. This is manifested by the static trend of OER, static trend of FMB. The oil palm is so profitable. Even if you have low FFB, because of land expansion, in the last few years, it's about more than 400K. Because of land expansion, it is profitable. See? So the emphasis on upstream technology is very minimal. Otherwise, we would have come up with innovation to reduce the dependency on labor.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Maybe I can try Mr. Abdul Jalil, just to give you an example. Let's just say the average worker for a plantation, maybe one worker to 12 hectare. Let's say for now.
Yes, correct.
Let's say with digitalization, we include some form of IoT to detect water stress, fruit maturity, disease incidents. Let's say with those kind of efficiency as well as connectivity to the logistics. So let's say with all of that, maybe it can be 18 hectare per one person. I know it's very hard to push. I remember when we spoke to stakeholders in the industry, it's very hard to push. But I think that's along the line of what Prof. Fatima is thinking about. Abdul Jalil, just to give you an idea. Okay, we need to move on to the next question. But before I move on to the written question, maybe I open to the floor for one or two verbal question. Can anyone else would like to ask a question? Okay, kalau tak ada, my next question is from Rafi.
Sarina, there's a question from
Yes, I would like
Dr. John. Is that? That's a hand up from
Yeah,
John.
yeah, I wanted to say something.
Okay, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Serena, Prof, and Dr. Elise. In fact, I'm presently working with CIRA on a palm labor issue. So interestingly, is perfect timing to actually talk about it. So what we realize is that labor productivity is the crux of the issue here. And it's always very interesting to see that people tend to focus on labor shortage rather than talking about how do we improve labor productivity. For example, I would like to draw attention to the potential of digitalization just now. So one way to actually reduce the reliance on laborers' input is that through digitalization, you actually can monitor what is the ripeness of your fruits on the tree prior to harvesting, and then your labor could avoid guessing how ripe it is, because we understand that the remuneration system is tied up to the quality of fruits that they harvested. So in any case that they harvest unripe fruits, then their salary will be deducted. So in that sense, digitalization can actually help you improve labor productivity. But rather in our study, just to share with you, the tricky challenges are about their target-based, or you call it piecemeal remuneration system. So presently, labor is pressed to meet daily targets, and many researchers have actually criticized this as being a precarious livelihood. So I'm not sure how much system dynamics can address this. Perhaps there are inputs that you can supplement to understand why there is a labor shortage issue and what are the main issues triggering the shortage. Thank you.
Thank you, John, very much. That's very, very helpful. I've got a question here from Nadia Kamil. Don't you think 15% of replanting rate for estate is too high, as it may influence the supply of CPO in the country?
I think the current rate is about 12%. So yes, the current rate is about 12%. But this is on average or pukul rata. But it depends on the situation of the composition of areas in each estate. In fact, which I forgot to mention, is that this model can be applicable on regional basis or even on estate basis. They can run it and put in their parameters. They can know the optimum mix of immature, mature, and overmature. So that figure is overall. And it can be kind of customized based on the region or estates and so on. Even the smallholders can do it. So any smallholders who are interested to see what's the best replanting rate for them, we can do it. All right. So I just want to mention that regarding the digitalization, I just want to say this: there is no one strategy that can address the problem, right? So it's about combination of various strategies, combination of this and that and whatever, and in total, it will reduce the dependency on labor problem. As I said earlier, since colonial times, even now, laborers are needed. So they are inevitable, but we can minimize our dependency on them by digitalization. We have not mentioned popular things like drones, right? So we have attempted to measure the area of oil palm using drones and cocoa for oil palm and cocoa, and we saw that drones were able to kind of identify the trees by their shapes of leaves, and that minimizes the energy to calculate number of trees and to also to identify the age of trees. So these are little things that can add up to minimize manual work in the farm process. Transportation, we need to come up with our own method of transporting FFB. We don't need to use trolleys and the old lorries. Transportation, there are smart, there are that use AIs, there are smart transportation. I know there are smart plowing in paddy field. So I'm sure it can be done in oil palm. And then pollination time, using AI. You don't need to, from what I heard, the workers have to climb 20 feet to check whether they are ready for pollination or not. And I heard there are cases of death and it's not reported. They have no insurance. By using AI, we can have transfer to internet, and then we can see whether it's suitable or not. And then also the harvesting time. I'm sorry, my husband is he's a biochemical person, so he is able to identify where is the best harvesting by calculating the number of leaves, palm oil leaves. So that is something new. So maybe you can use AI to identify the number of leaves and when leaves are ready to drop off and so on. So it is complicated, but I think ICT can help. Pollination, harvesting, and transportation, and many more. And of course, drones to help with the fertilizer distribution and so on, right? So as I said, these processes, when you added them up, I'm sure it reduces the cost of production. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Okay, we've got a question from Imran Arif from Free Malaysia Today. Prof, if you remember, I think you measured it was about 33% shortage of labor at the moment, 30 to 33%. Betul tak, Prof?
Yeah, about, yeah.
So Imran's question is that which is more urgent, finding more workers to make up for that shortage, or should we develop new methods to compensate and reduce the workers' need? Which one?
Yeah, I think labor shortage is quite critical, right? So we can see from the diagram that 50% it may reduce production. Right? Last year, for example, it reduced production from 2 something to 1.9 billion, and it cost the country 2 billion. So it is a serious issue. Without doubt, we have to depend on them in the short term, right? And pandemic has shown our helpless situation of depending on these foreign workers, not only oil palm, including maids. There's no maid because I'm one of the victim. The maid has gone, and then that affects our lives. So not only in oil palm but also in our home. So the two has to go together. If you ask my personal opinion, I think I'm sorry to say that we have not done enough. I think if you get the Japanese researcher, or now is the Chinese researcher to come here and help us, I'm sure they can do it. I always suggest small mills in paddy farm, and I was shocked to see in Alibaba there are so many mills, little mill like 2K, 3K. Drying mills, 500 ringgit, so you don't have to depend on big mills, because the moment you face big mills, be it oil palm or rubber, the smallholders become very small. They can't negotiate when you are at the front of in front of big mills. So we need little mills that can help smallholders to survive and to do value-added activities. So very small to them, 30 ringgit, 40 ringgit, but it's enough to change their life. Thank you.
Can I come in?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, my next question is, so far we have spoken, we have not touched anything on yield enhancement because the national average now stands about 21 metric tons per hectare, whereas the possibility, potential of increasing to 29 up to 50 tons per hectare. So this is what caused by a few factors. The first thing is even the estates don't know how many trees they have. So this is when we should have a drone count in order to identify actually how many trees are really contributing. On the productive yield, we should stress on the water stress, because that's the amount which there is already a study done in one estate in Ladang Bukit Kramat, whereby the yield has increased from 15 to 29 metric tons per hectare. So onwards, after this, then we are aiming to achieve the national average, to increase the national average maybe to 39 to 40. That is possible because we have got some system using nanotechnology in order, and nanonutrition system combined with integrated irrigation system, so that we can hit the national average. We are talking to a few big plantations now, and we hope to receive good support for it. Now, the other thing is the Ganoderma. what do you call that, threat in all the plantations. In one, it is estimated that in 100,000 acres plantation, there's about 5%, which amounts to quite a sizable amount of number of Gadurma. This is what is seeping out our yield status. So what we have to do now is to look at the yield of the, to increase the yield national average. Naturally, from the currently about 2025, Sandagi is still struggling to achieve about 23 to 25. We should aim to achieve about 39 to 40, and that's possible. That with a bit of willpower and a bit of technology and change of mindset in the plantations, I think that can be done. And certainly, the second point is on the labor shortage. I have done trials in plantations in Pahang, in Western Pahang. Unfortunately, it was not welcome through mechanization because each machine can replace about 10 workers using one system which I have already we have already tried. But what we have to do is that these machines are only applicable depending on whether what do you call that, the terrain is permissible. So let's see the percentage of the terrain which is permissible. That we can also do a what do you call the terrain study using the drones, and then only those areas which are what do you call reachable by the mechanized units can use the labor manpower. The rest we can use mechanization, and these will reduce manpower to the tune of 90%. So that is possible. I think we should look into that. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much.
Well said. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm practically proposing to a few big plantations now on this, and hopefully, if this pick it up, I hope that it can go forward to the bigger plantations, a few 100,000 acres, what they call each time. Imagine if you can improve the national average from, let's say, 21 to 25 metric tons per hectare to 39 to 40. You will double. You almost double the increase, and you will increase the palm oil contribution in the country towards maybe 70 billion. So we have to take up this challenge. Thank you.
Well noted. Thank you so much. It was very useful. Okay, I want to move on to Niaz Asadullah. Prof, she's got 3 questions. Her first question is that, can you please clarify your underlying behavioral model and how you translated this into system dynamics format? I don't see any theoretical framework. Prof, macam mana, Prof?
All right. As I said, you can put everything into the model, but what's important to make it useful is variables that matter. Variables that matter in explaining the behavior. Behavior that we have looked here is the aging change, which is reflected in the composition of immature area, mature area, and over mature area. And the main factor that determine the behavior of this cohort of trees are replanting rate and their response to opening up land, by looking at how they respond to land opening, by looking up at the markup, relative markup oil palm to cocoa. Of course, we can include everything, but it's not easy, right? I'm sure Elise has the number of variables that we have put into the system is more than 1,000 plus. So you can imagine if one variable change, we have to be there until 3 o'clock in the morning to find out what are the impact on the system. We have to look at, the impact because it goes to the various section of the system, and that can be very difficult. So we confine to the major one that are the drivers that make the system dynamic or change over time. So the behavior we are looking at here is, in the case of oil palm, the area has increased, what we call it linear growth. It's not exponential. At the early stage is linear, exponential, but after 80s, it becomes linear. The change over the years of, more or less the same, all right? So we want to explain why did that happen? And we want to look in terms of the role of replanting rate, the role of yield, and the role of what if we reduce the cost of production, and of course, looking at the challenges that faced by the industry, and that is the labor and price shocks, right? Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Her second question is, when modeling double shocks, which is in this case labor and price, Why did you not allow for opposite shocks, which means maybe price went up? What do you think, Prof?
Well, price went up, everybody's happy, including the smallholders, the politician, or even me, you know, it's good for the industry. So there's no need to model. It's very, what do you call it? It's very, not to say no-brainer, but it's common sense. Good price increase is good for the certain sectors of the industry, particularly producers. And producers here refers to the corporate sectors as well as smallholders. Thank you.
Okay, third last question. What is the behavioral origin of labor shortage apart from foreign worker supply? What about labor market frictions and barriers to labor mobility?
All right, that is outside the boundary of the study. When you talk about labor friction and so on, then it becomes labor economics. And then we have to look into labor supply and labor demand. That's a different issue altogether. So we have defined our boundary from the very beginning, and that is to look at the number one, the what do you call it, the elements that will improve the system performance. Yeah, that's where we identify replanting rate, yield, and cost production. Right. I have mentioned it many times in many forums that Malaysia ought to look into our local input sector. We have not looked into that for a long time. Of course, there are 7 sisters in fertilizer trade in the industry, but we need to produce our own. Even Thailand and Vietnam, they produce about 30 to 40% input locally, and that is enough to reduce the cost of production. Whereas in our case, I think close to 80 to 90% we imported for the past 50 years. So it's about time that we utilize our our food waste, our biomass to produce our very own local input to help develop the industry, to help reduce the cost, and to help the youngs to come into the input industry. So we look at that as one of the factors that will improve the system performance: yield, replanting rate, and reduction in input costs. The major challenges that face in the industry, this is where we put in the simulation, simulation 5, 6, and 7. That is price shocks, not ordinary price variation, but shocks to the extent of 30%, 50%, 80%, together with labor shortages, 30%, 50%, 80%, and we combine both. So these are the rationale that define the boundary of our model. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Well described. So Nias Asadullah, basically what it means is that your suggestion is not wrong. It's just that we needed to limit the amount of variables we put in. Otherwise, we will never finish this project. And, and perhaps the system might be a bit too, unstable. So we needed to really be selective. So we're not saying that these other variables are not important, but we had to limit ourselves for that matter. Okay, before I scroll down, because I see a few more questions, shall I open to the floor? Anyone would like to ask a question? Okay, I've got a question from Azhan Hassan. How stakeholder engagement have been conducted to enable the transition of brilliant ideas into the policy of food security in Malaysia? A bit off topic, I think, but Prof, you or Elise, you want to come in on this?
Prof, are you going to comment on the food security?
You want to try? Why don't you try?
Sorry, another question again.
Okay, the question is how stakeholder engagement have been conducted to enable the transition of brilliant ideas into the policy of food security in Malaysia?
Well, we have conducted several surveys through focus group discussion with the smallholders and also the estates or the key industry players. From them, we have several questions that to be clarified in terms of, for example, about the replanting period, the area where about, you know, those kind of things help us to determine how we set up the model itself, how we set the boundary to the model. And from the information that we get, it transfer into behavior. We put it into a lookup function table. In Vensim, they have this assumption of behavior in terms of, for example, that we do not know exactly the replanting rate that most suitable for a state or for the smallholders. So in order to do that, we have to make an assumption. So through this FGDs, we were able to determine what kind of replanting rate would be suitable for the estate and also for the smallholders. And when it comes to the effect on the food security, I think, Prof, you might want to, you know, jump into that.
Okay. The way I read the question is the role of a focus group discussion in ensuring food security. I think you have given a very, very good point. Let me give you an analogy. Yesterday, I was listening to Dialectica. There was a discussion on the education policy in this country, and Anwar Ibrahim was the chairperson. And I was very, very unhappy to hear, very sad to hear that there was no engagement at all with the stakeholders, with the students, with the parents, with the school on the what to do with our education system, what to do with kids that have lost 1 year of education. So problems like some parents do not have a laptop, the marginalized students in the Hutan, in the Sabah, Sarawak, the Orang Asli, the OKU, because there are no engagement. So I think Pemandu has introduced the policy lab where various stakeholders give their input, which is a very good point. We must continue with that. And I think because the new minister, he's not used to it. So it's all top down. It shouldn't be. The best policy are the policy that bottom up, supported with, supported by from the top in terms of resources and so on. So for food security or even for labor shortages and so on, we need to listen to the stakeholders' mouth themselves. What are really their problem, right? Why are for example, in the estate, why are the FFB have not improved over the years? Why is the OER has not improved over the years? Why is that they continue to pay cheap? I don't know, the Kementerian Kesihatan have not gone to the estate, to check on their pandemic or on their COVID. I know some of the accommodations are as bad as the Kappa, So you look at our industry players, they place their workers in a container, 3 containers to share 1 toilet. That's why the origin of our third wave, besides the Sabah election. So we need to get their viewpoint to get a better policy perspective and to come up with strategies to address. I know this is not easy, but the stakeholders' view matters. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to add here, when we talk about mitigating labor shortage risk, I want you all to be aware that it's not just about bringing in more migrants, or it is not about replacing that with digitalization, mechanization. This study has shown the importance of taking good care of our migrants. Now, COVID-19 pandemic, if it hits our laborers in the oil palm, we're in big trouble. So it emphasizes the importance of better healthcare provision, living condition, and just basic human rights to take better care of them. It also emphasizes the really importance of international relations, as well as managing government-to-government relationship. So it is so important for the government of Malaysia to take care of our relationship with Indonesia, because if Indonesia got pissed off and decided, hey, no more Indonesians into Malaysia, we are in serious trouble. So those are also some of the ways we can take care and mitigate those risks in the oil palm industry.
Thank you, Serena. That's a good point.
Anyone else wants to add anything before we close off? 1 more minute.
That's Serena. I got one question from Facebook from Pui Q Ling. And the question is, why uses assisted dynamic and not other economic modeling? Why uses system dynamic and not other economic
I
model?
love that question. Prof, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
Why don't you try, Sarina, from your perspective, because you're not a
Sure,
system
no
dynamics
problem.
person. Okay,
Okay,
right.
now, we're not, okay, all models, all models have their positives and their negatives, okay? And one thing about the economics model, I'm not saying it's bad, okay? But I'm just saying it has its limitations. And everyone's done it, right? It's not adding value if we do another economics model. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize is that the economics model is usually what we call two-dimensional, in, out. Move these changes, right? But in system dynamics, I want you to imagine system dynamics is like a living system whereby you change a little bit here, the output here and another output here changes, and it changes according to the rate as well. So that's why it's called dynamic. And the thing is with industries, it's not a linear or it's not a two-dimensional model, right? Industries are complicating. When you change the yield, suddenly cost of production change. I'm just giving an example. But at the same time, there's a change in labor. There's a change in estate behavior. Everything is dynamic. So we want it to be as realistic as possible. And we think from our perspective is that system dynamics are able to capture that as much as possible. In fact, the challenge is to limit the variables because otherwise we could just never finish this work. Prof, maybe you want to add on?
Thank you, Sarina. You are a good student. Worth the effort. You worth the effort. Okay.
Prof. I would like to add in to Sarina's point. Okay. One thing about the advantage of using system dynamics is it's a combination of qualitative and also quantitative studies. You have the focus group discussion in terms of the qualitative data, and then you have the quantitative where you have the time series data where this can be put into one model. If you compare with what Sarina said just now about the economics analysis, is more into one view where it depends on the quantitative data, on the time series data, whereas for system dynamics, like what Prof have mentioned earlier, it's not point to point, but it's more on the behavior, more on the long run behavior. And another thing is that system dynamics does not need someone to have a very strong statistical background, but it's more in understanding the concept itself, more about realizing the reality of the behavior in the real world. So that's the good thing about system dynamics. And another thing is that like what Sarina said, by changing one parameter, we will affect other parameters, because in system dynamics, it's all about interdisciplinary, interrelated between subsystem, between the biological, the social, the economic. So you can have all these different kind of discipline into one model. So that's the beauty or the uniqueness about using system dynamics. Yeah, over to you, Prof.
Yeah. Thank you, Elise. Very good system dynamics students. I'm sure I'm sure some of you have been with the system dynamics. I know Emmy and Dr. I forgot his name from Ideas. All right. Let me reiterate what system is. System is about seeing the forest and the trees at the same time. Right? Some of you can see the forest, but you cannot see the trees. But system dynamics is able to get you view the system as a whole, the forest, in this case, the production area of oil palm together with rubber and cocoa, and the trees, which are the behavioral or structural parameters, constants, stocks, and so on, how they interact each other, and which explain the reduction in rubber area, reduction in cocoa, and the increase in area of oil palm from rubber and cocoa, as well as new area, right? So of course, econometric can do it, but they have limitation. The beauty of system dynamics is that it is able to capture dynamism over time and over space, right? It is able to capture complexity. Complexity is defined as non-linearity in behavior, right? It's not linear. Human behavior is not linear. There are behavior, there are, S-shaped, there are behavior that are exponential, there are behavior that shows decaying, right? and also delays, also to capture trade-offs in the system, and yeah, these are the major one: nonlinearity, complexity, and the main one is the inter-feedback relationship or causality loop. Everything, as in physical science, every response has a reaction. There is a feedback loop in the system, right? The higher the growth rate, the higher the death rate. The higher the death rate will affect growth rate and so on. So the system moves in a loop over the years and over space. So that's the beauty of system dynamics. But as Sarina said, that as Prof. Sturman concluded, all models are wrong, period. But there are some models that are able to capture the pertinent relationship in the system that explain the system performance or behavior. So our role here in system dynamics to capture what are the important variables that shape the behavior and therefore the overall performance of the system. It's not an easy, like in the case of labor, I saw Nias want to put in the labor supply, labor law, friction in labor. Of course, those are important, but they are not directly related in affecting the composition of the cohorts in the system. It does not affect directly in terms of the replanting rate, for example, right? So we need to omit them out. We need to be sure of the boundary of the system to be able to come up with a minimal analysis that can be used for policy decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, we are running out of time. I really appreciate everyone for asking questions. In fact, I thought this is a very, very lively one with a lot of questions from everyone. Although I notice everyone likes to type and not talk it out, don't know why. But thank you. And I think there was one or two that we couldn't answer, but time is really running out. We are so sorry. But you're more than welcome to contact us as well if you want to know more. And you can download the report free at Khazanah Research Institute's website. With this, I thank you, the speakers, the organizer, and everyone else for participating. Have a great day, everyone.